We are live on Facebook as of now. Should be coming together here soon. Yep, there we are. Manage the video. All right. Well, there, Mark. We're live and everything is in set. How you doing tonight, Mark?
Pretty good, Scott. How are you doing?
Wonderfully. Did you have a Merry Christmas?
I did. I could complain about our water heater going out on Christmas Eve, spending most of the day doing that, but I'm just honestly thankful that they were still open and I was able to get that fixed and get hot water, and that was a pretty easy Christmas present.
Do you guys do anything special for Christmas or anything like that?
We just had our oldest daughter and my son-in-law over, and then our daughter that still lives with us, and we did Christmas breakfast that morning. And the weekend prior, we had Christmas with the Elliott family, my dad's side of the family. So, I mean, depends on how you look at it. Nothing too crazy and special, but definitely a good time.
You get any good derby parks for Christmas this year, Mark?
Well, we got a lot of good derby parts for the Freedom Ticket ride, but well, I guess quite a few of them were gifts. They're gifts to whoever wins the car. But definitely having fun getting those things rounded up, and it's always fun getting new parts rolling in.
So, what gave you the idea to do the whole Freedom Ticket ride and all that stuff?
Money. Yeah, just like if there's one thing that I hate doing. I don't know that hate's the right word, but I do not like asking people for things. So most of the sponsors that we have are people that just reach out and say, "Hey, we want to support," which is awesome. Um, but just to continue to try to give more to the drivers, um, it was a way that actually Mark Klein and myself started talking about opportunity for them to get Derby builds involved, which was just supposed to be that in the beginning. I was never supposed to build the car, but uh, I'll let you go and buy a bunch of parts and then let somebody else build it and see how that works out for you. So that it just all kind of came together, and we raised so much money for the drivers. Every dollar but went to them, and I love building derby cars, so why wouldn't we do it again?
So, going from how you love to build derby cars, how'd you get into derbying, Mark?
My mom took me to our county fair ever since I was 2 years old. Um, I didn't miss one of them for a long time. But as far as actually that was the love, right? That was the Hot Wheels on grandma's floor. That was the love for it. Sitting in the stands and picking who's going to win. And then my uncle, he ran a few cars. I don't know that he ever ran 10 cars, but I remember a few, and getting to be part of that, whether it was taking out a headlight or just being a part of it, that definitely that definitely fueled the fire. And then friends got me started, but that still really did not. The match never lit until I decided like this is something I want to do, and those same friends helped me actually get into it competitively.
So, when was your first derby then?
Um, the first time he talked me into running one was I was 15 years old, so that was probably like 1994ish, around in there, and it was Butler County, Ohio, um, and it was the most fun I'd ever had.
So, who was running Butler County in the '90s? Who was the guys on top? Was it the Rutherfords or was it before them?
No, they've always been a good part of it. I mean, the names go on the Timmy Isaacs, John Rutherford, John Purvis, Brian Wolgast, all those guys were running then. Mike Tencher, all those guys were running then. But, the thing that stands out is like from that memory is John Alt Sr. He was one of the other guys that had an open face helmet like I did, so I could see his facial expressions, and he's a pretty wild dude anyway. So we was getting it on, and Ron Barker, man, this guy, he seemed like he's about 80 then, but he probably turned 10, 20 years. So I remember making the hardest hit that I made on Ron Barker. And like you ask John Rutherford about Ron Barker. He's a trip.
So you're from Preble, right? Or are you from Butler? Which county is yours then?
Preble County.
So after your first derby, did you go run Preble like the same year, or like how did you move into Preble?
No, I did not run again for a little while, and then even like a few years down the road, it was like rerun stuff. From that same friend who later became my stepbrother, but Jason Wisman, Brendan's dad. I ran a couple things, but like I said, until I decided like I'm gonna, whatever it takes, I'm gonna own some stuff and I'm gonna put a car together. That spark just never stayed lit, and that was 2001. So like I'd already got into life quite a bit, and honestly was going down a path that if I would have continued to go down that path, I would not have any of the success that I've had today. So like I'm not trying to write some story that Demolition Derby saved my life, but getting so involved in that, I could have been doing a whole lot worse things.
So what was the first car that you personally built?
A 1985 Crown Vic standard frame. My friends that I partied with for many years of during high school and after, his mom had this black 4-door Vic, and then my one friend ended up buying it from her. So like we raised so much hell in this car. Like I can remember him doing neutral drops, 30 or 40 of them until we blew the rear end out of it. And like just this fields, whatever, just destroyed this car. And I end up with that car. I still got the keys to that car hanging on the little trophy that I got whenever I went and ran Wilmington, Clinton County, I think it is, Ohio.
So what was that car? Was it a stock car, or was like that the time when builds started to get a little bit heavier, or where was the build at?
No, it was definitely at that time Crown Vics were still real stock. The doors in the trunk were wired shut. It had the stock rear end in it. At that time, the engine that I built still had stock heads, factory tube. I mean, it really wouldn't much get out of its way, but it the car kick started that fire because when I went and ran it and had a little luck and then came back, I mean, that was when we were running stock drive shafts. So if that tells you the kind of parts that were in the car.
So after that, like, how did you go from that to running some of the biggest shows in the country?
I don't know, man. I've always explained it like a crack pipe. I'm telling you, when I say that fire hadn't lit yet, once that fire lit, um, that's all. That's all I wanted to do, 24/7. If I was not working, it was in the garage, and it didn't matter what kind of shape the car was in. If it still rolled on and off the trailer, I always looked at it like maybe you could get a little more out of it, and then as soon as it was junk, it was on to the next, and I just never quit for several years after that.
So what was one of your biggest like national wins?
I don't know. I I hate the term national because it's so like it's somebody's opinion of what means national. I don't know. I honestly don't know what my opinion on national is. At one time, you were somebody if you'd won a $10,000 derby. Uh, so it was like people would be like, "Oh, you're in the $10,000 club." I never treated any derby any different. I didn't care what it paid. It was the car was going to be as good as the cars I knew how to have. And I think the first time that I ever won any kind of money like that was it was back when Don Long was doing it with back-to-back promotions, and it was where was it? Wilmington, Ohio. So it's before he moved to Washington Courthouse. He had I don't even remember what the show was called, but at that time I can only remember three or four shows that paid that kind of money anywhere close to us.
So going from that, like, what is some of your favorite memories from derbying back then, back in the beginning of it?
Hmm. Favorite memories. Honestly, that was when majority of the derbies were heats and feature. And I've always hung my hat on, like, there's just things you can't control in a derby. There's things that happen, like everybody's got their different opinion about luck. Some we make and some like crazy things just happen. Um, but I always definitely hung my hat on I'm not going to get outworked. And so, like, there's something special about hauling some hunk of crap off the heat track that you got to have help to get back there. And you just, whether it's true or not, you think in your mind that everybody's counting you out. And then you spend the next 8 hours, 6 hours. And back then, sometimes if you was in the last heat, you might be lucky to have 2 hours. But whatever that time frame was, is almost like an art, like a project that this is the amount of time you have. So what are the 10 things you're going to get done that's going to get that car to the end? And like I think there's an art to that because if you work on the wrong things, uh, then you might not get to the end. So you really had to look at that time you really had to look at how much time you actually had and what you were going to get done. And I can remember pulling on the feature track and my stepdad like chasing me out there dumping water out of a 5-gallon bucket over the radiator just for what, one more degree, whatever, as a peace of mind. When you pulled out there, you knew it was time to go.
Is there any certain shows that just pop out and like just stand out when you're thinking about like events like that?
Well, I've have a terrible memory, so like the memories come and go, and then they also get blended together. But the most recent memory, well, honestly, the most recent memory I have of that, of getting in that mindset, is the Freedom Ticket car last year, because that's part of the deal. Not only does the person win the car, um, they get me for, like, if their goal is to win, like, I want to help them the best I can. And so whenever Kurt Russell made the feature, which he'd never ran a show like that because he did not have the equipment or the confidence, whatever. Um, Whenever he made the feature, like, they were ready to, they as in him and his friends, it was like time to celebrate and pop some beers. And I'm like, back in the truck, like, it's time to work. Not only are we going to work, but you won Mad Dog, so we're going to work all night. So, and he looked at me like I had four heads, but the experience we had of watching his friends come together, you almost watch it in stages where, like, for 4 hours, this guy's not done anything. He's just stood there, but not because he doesn't want to help. He does not know what to do. And the second you give that guy something to do, now he's in there helping. And like that experience you have with those few people or whoever they are that help you get that car back to that feature track. That's the most recent memory I have of getting that fix of that's like a drug that I just I was hiring a kite on life, just getting to share that experience with him and then watching him go out there in the feature and run that car. It was awesome.
I know the exact feeling. Like this past year at No Mercy, when it was me, Steven Sickles, Mark Metz, and Heilman, we get through the first heat, and like, I mean, we pretty easy heat, and everybody's thinking and everybody's like, it's time to celebrate and all this. And like, I'm just like, I'm trying to tell these guys it's not over yet. We still got like 3 more rounds to go before we even get to the feature. And they're looking at me like I'm crazy because I'm like, I'm telling these guys I'm going to work all night, and the car has like a few scratches in it. But there's still in the back of my mind, there's a list of things that I still had to do that I didn't get to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And even if you don't work all night, like I said, whatever time you're going to get to work, whether it's you only got 6 hours or you're only going to choose 6 hours, you'd better make those 6 hours count, because I believe a car only ever has one more hit. And like if it's that last bolt that you put in or that last thing that you tighten, that might be the hit that wins you the Derby.
I know exactly what you're saying. And even going back to that, have you ever had times where like where you're in that it's time is limited, even building the car, you're in a rush and you get there and you end up not doing you didn't do what you thought you were going to do, but in the back of your mind you're like, I didn't give it everything I actually had. Do you ever have that feeling from time to time?
Every time, probably, because like you always want to do more. I've always said a car is never done. There's just this time that these people tell us that we got to pull it off, but it's never done. And like if a lot of people see me without painted cars because like me being a dick, if somebody said, "Oh, because this happened," I'd be like, "Well, it was painted, wasn't it? It's painted. Great. I'm sorry this part fell off, but at least it looked amazing."
Like, before we go on a little bit, so this past year, dead man, I built that Lincoln, and the entire time, like, and to everybody else, it looked like I was giving it everything I had, but like I knew there was the times where I cut out, or I took the easy way out on some stuff. And then what ended up taking me out was I never ended up putting steering stops on it, so I got hit in the wheel once and snapped the tie rod in half.
Hmm.
And it's just that I just felt the entire weekend that like I kept telling myself this is our weekend, but like I could feel that like it just wasn't. You know what I mean?
I Yeah, I do believe you could be driving a brick of gold, and if there's something's going to stop you that night, it's going to stop you. I I believe we work hard, and I believe good things happen, but I just believe there's some things that happen in Demolition Derby that if we spend too much time trying to figure out, we'll make ourselves crazy.
Yeah, you're like trying to keep the steering on a car no matter what happens. Yeah, you'll go insane.
Well, that's when you got to cross paths with somebody like me that's going to ask you, then what? Tell me again why you didn't win, because steering never is not the answer. So like, there's always a way, right? So you know, whether you got steering or whether or not, if it's your night, you can win that son of a bitch upside down.
Oh, that's how does that? So going off of that, do you think you make luck, or do you think luck is just something God gifts to you that night?
I used to get a big chip, not get, I had a chip on my shoulder. And like I can remember I can remember winning both nights of Richmond, Indiana in the same car. And I can remember a local friend stopping by and saying, "You got lucky," and he was laughing. And I remember getting my undies in a bunch. It 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 pissed me off because I knew how hard I worked for that, and I knew what I did behind that wheel. And for somebody to say you got lucky, so for a long time, whenever people would say, "Oh, I got lucky," or Toby's one of the first people I crossed paths with would always say that, and like, "Oh, I just got lucky." I'm like, man, don't freaking cut yourself short. You worked your tail off and you drove that car like a god. Like there there might be a little bit of luck in that because maybe a bolt didn't break that might break as some freak accident, but that was the furthest thing from luck. But then the older I've got, and I think the wiser, like I just think sometimes that same car that you said, like, well, as a national big show or something, that Don Long Derby, that was a 1990 HD cop car, and I could not see out of the front or the back. And I know you know what that feels like and everybody's giving you hell about being back. You're like, well, something happened to my car and I did not get junked. But that's all that car had. That car had enough to get to the end and it was junk. And when I backed it off the trailer, I put it in reverse and zing, every bolt was ripped out of the flywheel. So the center of the flywheel looked like a wheel center. It was still it was still bolted to the engine, to the crank, but the entire flywheel was loose. That's all that car had left. If I would have put it in gear one more time, then that $10,000 goes to Brad Taylor.
I know the exact feeling. Like this past year at the Bash when I won Smash It Minis, that car, like that, the reason I think luck is it's either your night or it isn't when it comes to luck is because that car, I after the Bash the past year, I burned up a trans because I didn't. That was the first time I ever drove stick shift in a derby car. Didn't know what I was doing. Smoked the clutch out of it. Pull it out. Literally, after the Bash, I sat that thing behind the barn with a tarp over it. Didn't touch it. Didn't look at it. Anything. And then I, like literally a week before the Bash, because I was somewhat ahead of schedule on my Lincoln for the team class, I was like, we're going to go there. I already got the spot. It makes sense to do it. You know what I mean? And then, like, I pulled that car out. I changed the trans in it. Had a bent axle. I don't know how that car did what it did. And then I go out there, and that weekend was the definition of luck. I get the easiest heat. The cars I didn't even add water to it because it didn't do anything. We go out into the feature, drive around. Somehow, some way, God blessed me with the win at the Bash for Cash. I don't know how, but that's just what happened. But I spend countless hours on a different car that I pour everything I have into, and it just says, no, maybe next time.
Yeah, that's a great example because that whether it's luck, whether it's the universe, whether it's karma, whether it's God, like whatever you want to blame it on or believe in, like there's things that just happen that fall our way. And on those nights, I think you said it earlier, on those nights it just feels like things are going well. Like check, this went our way, check, this went our way. And then we had confidence when we got there. Like we had a plan when we got there, but when those things keep happening throughout the day, like call me crazy, I don't care, I probably am, but it's almost like you start feeling like that there ain't nothing going to stop me tonight. And I've like put myself in check for saying stuff like that, but like that's really how you feel at the end of a night when so many things have went right. Like somebody better have a plan because they're going well tonight.
I know exactly. Like, and even go back to the Bash, like I do remember this though. When I pulled that car up, it was me and I don't know if you know Dustin Ruark, big, tall, goofy guy, runs Hondas. Like he called me on the phone and he was talking me into it. He's like, we got to go run the Bash, you know, and just like, and like I was doing it as a joke, you know, like I'm not taking it seriously. I don't expect to. I'm just going to go out there and have fun, get warmed up for the team class is what I thought. And I probably said, because Dustin, the thing he said was, we're winning the Bash. We're winning the Bash. Guy's first out. But the spirit that guy brings was like, yeah, we're winning the Bash. We're winning the Bash. I remember it was hilarious because it's, you know, when there is a big feature, it's the political things going on right behind the back line by all the cars, you know. And I walk up to Dustin. I'm like, where are you at? He's like, didn't make it. I said, it's all right. I'm winning the Bash right in front of everybody. And I could just feel the stares. And I was like, well, boys, I guess I got to go. See you guys. Yeah, I still can't believe that
happened. Yeah. Surprised they didn't want to jump on you.
Yeah, that's what I thought, you know, which, I mean, I don't know. Turd Brown all the way, I suppose. So going off of that, so how did you go from being the big Derby driver, the big name, to the Unified Point Series? What transitioned in between there?
Todd Hollander. Um, Todd derbied with Todd for years, and Todd started putting on Bell Fountain, had a derby. It was after the Bash used to be at Bell Fountain, but Todd started, like, I be careful to say promoting, but like when a fair board pays you to come there and have inspectors and do that, he did that much for a couple years. But I don't know whether Toby told him to or what, but he called and said that he'd seen that I'd done a little public speaking and asked if I would announce. So that's how that all started. There was never a plan for that, and I'm still trying to figure out how and why I'm even doing that. But that was the segue. That the announcing the announcing kept me close to the sport that I enjoy, and the point series did not come until I think I'd been announcing for, well, in 2015. That was the second time that I had announced because John Peck had a derby in West Virginia that I went and ran. So I announced and ran the derby. And then that following year, I actually announced some derbies, like multiple derbies. And the point series did not start until that year of COVID, which was 2020. So I had already announced for 5 years before now and going into our fifth year. Well, crap, I never realized that. I guess this coming year will be my 10th year of announcing, I guess. Man, that's crazy.
So what are some of your favorite like experiences you've had like announcing?
Oh my gosh, I could tell 100 stories of just, I love winning so much that it started to be a fault for me as a driver, that like I struggled with knowing how to lose and being okay with it and moving on. Like when you did have that car and every, like, just understanding like how did that happen. So um I say that just to paint the picture for how much that I love to win. And that's what the point series stands for. It stands for winning. So, like, to take that full circle to the announcing, whether before that point series started or now, um, I think I might like watching a good friend win just as much or more. And especially when I got some skin in the game, like whether I've helped them or whether we've had a phone conversation that week, or like, it just, watching people put in the work and overcome the challenges that every one of us face in some different way to even get the dang car on the track, and to watch them go out there. And I always say, like, the day it's no longer about seeing who the better man or woman is that night, that's the day I'm out, because there's something special about watching somebody take, you've mentioned that Bash, like when that feature started, like, you almost didn't have expectations, and like, I watched it. I was there. You worked your way all the way to the end. It's like a chess match or a ballet, and it's an art. Like, to be able to do that, you know, whether you get a bunch of crap about bagging or doing this or that, like, you're pacing that car out for what it has to get to the end, and most of the time that's all the car's got, because you about got to rebuild it to even run it again.
So going from that, how did you found the point series itself off of announcing? What how did that start?
Um, Josh Woodward from Connorsville, Indiana. Whenever I started announcing, like I said, like that second year, then I had multiple shows. Well, I started creating like it was an Excel spreadsheet, but I tried to jazz it up with some color and it basically showed the schedule. So at that time, 2019, let's say I had 15 shows and I posted that, and Josh Woodward commented on that on social media and said that would make one heck of a point series or whatever. I don't even know if he used the term point series. It doesn't matter. Whatever he said, it was like it just, how you kind of, it's like a fish. That hook kind of sunk in the jaw a little bit. And like my wife would probably tell the story better, but there I laid in bed and like my mind just started rolling. And it's like I figured it out from A to Z and like what my thoughts were in a half hour or something. And then I started telling her, and she's like, "You're nuts." You're like, "Why? Like, why? Why you already do? Why would you want to add more?" And, but like that, it was already rolling so heavy in my mind. Then it was like having the courage to actually tell somebody. And then I just sent a group text to um, every promoter that was on that schedule of like 16 promoters and said, "This is what I'm thinking." The fear of like maybe three of them might say, "Oh, cool," or "Yeah, we're in," and the rest, we get this head trash that nobody's going to agree or want to be a part of it. And within an hour, every one of them was in. So it was like within 24 hours, it was happening.
So going from since you have all the promoters under one wing, what are your thoughts on like all the promoters unifying and progressing the sport or something along those lines? What are your thoughts on that?
Um, like I know there's a lot of talk about it right now, like forward thinking, but I always like to highlight how much where it's at today compared to where it was when you're asking me about stuff from 20 years ago. Like it's leaps and bounds from where it was. So like I mean, you said it. There was those 15 to 16 promoters, and I've never painted the picture that they all held hands and sang kumbaya, because they have their own agendas, but they all were in that same group text and they all agreed to it, and most of them gave input. So I guess the best answer I got to that question, if that's possible, who knows what else is possible. I know that it it takes a lot of work. Whatever you do, I talked to you about that honeymoon stage. Whenever, whenever the honeymoon stage wears off, uh, and you got to find out how bad you really want something to work. Like anybody that's going to do anything in this sport, they got to be willing to grind it out.
So that's something I want to touch on real quick, but after this, so from the promoters coming together, what are your thoughts on like the whole mainstream thing right now, the whole unified rule set? Is that just fairyland, or do you think that's something that could actually happen?
I think that um, there's a lot of fairyland in there, but I also am one, like I just said, if this is possible, what else is possible? So, like, I'm not a hard fairyland. Um, and I'm also one of my pet peeves is like, well, we already tried that or we already did that. I think Gage said it. Me, Tim, Clark, and then Wicked was in on it because Buchanan was working for them. Um, and I drove that. I said, let's like, there's like 7 or 8 derbies right here. We could have the same rules. We met with Russ Clark and Jacob and the whole team, and it was a positive experience. It fell apart whenever the first time somebody was like, well, they got to run this at this. And my pitch the whole time was not, it's not going to be the same. Like, it was that, hey, it's going to be the same rules and the cars are going to look about 80% the same. And I'm going to be able to go run this car at all these shows. I may have to add a little bit or take a little bit away. That was my thoughts in listening to today's talk about it. I hear a solid consensus that the only way it would work would be with the same inspector, so the cars were all the same. And if I'm playing devil's advocate to that, I think one thing that's special about Demolition Derby is how it's not the same. It's we get to be creative, and if you get bored building this kind of car, then you go build this kind of car, and like I know I'm not alone. That when you dive into a new set of rules and you read every one of them, think every way you're going to build that car, every part you got to buy, and everything, every gap that's in there, like there's a charge off of that like they're probably not drugs good enough for that. Like I don't think that I would get that charge if every car was the same and like is black and white. Like that's me. I can't speak for everybody, but I definitely think there's some challenges like that I don't hear people talking about. I don't know that anybody thinks like I do, but it would certainly come with you talk about a honeymoon stage wearing off. Like that's ever going to work. Uh, Somebody better be ready to drop everything they're doing and 100% focus on that thing, just that one thing to make it work and take a lot on the chin and a lot of criticism and to keep doing it for years. Not that's not something you flip the switch and oh it works next year and we're doing this. Like that's years to make something like that happen. That's my opinion.
I know exactly what you're saying, which I think the problem with the unified rule set is if Derby drivers built basic cars and didn't do what you just said, like, and I'm not gonna lie, I do the same thing. Is
Right.
when you get your set of rules and you're like, well, boys, we got to sit here and see in the next 10 hours after we figure out exactly what we're gonna do. If they didn't do that, and if Derby drivers just followed the basic rules and didn't go overboard, I think it would be very easy and obtainable to do. But let's be honest, that's never going to happen.
No, I don't think so. And so like just to think of a few names of respect, I respect these people's opinions. Don Santel, Bill Miller, like guys that have ran for points, have John Shipley. Like those guys have said, Mark, now's the time. Whether it was 4 years ago or this year, now's the time. You're the guy. You could make this happen. And I honestly could, Scott. At a small level, I could say, all right, if you're going to be in this series, these are the classes and these are the rules. And if you want to be a part of it, this is what you got to do. And if not, that's great. But this is what we're doing. So then we would find out who's in and out on that. But like the question that I always ask those guys is, do you really think people have the balls for that? And I always tell the story of, I don't mean to like sound like some old man. Back in my day, we walked uphill in the snow. No, Toby talked me into going and running this point series in Kentucky. And to make a story not so long, what he told me when we went there was, Mark, we're going to junk everything in our path. And then the next time we come back, there's going to be less people. And I don't know if you know this or not, but Toby's pretty smart and he was spot on. But what he did, what he failed to plan was that eventually the promoter would not pay us because at the first show there was 100 cars, the next show there was 80, then 50, then the last couple shows there was less than 10 cars, and it was only the craziest son of a bucks that would even derby with us, um, Clayton Hadley, and that crew, friends for life. But like when I say, do the derby drivers even have the balls? So you telling me, and this is my pushback on these guys when they try to talk me into doing that for the point series, and I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong, but what I think would happen is, okay, now there's this class that I'm telling this promoter they got to run and they got to pay for it. So maybe they get 20 cars, and then there's going to be I think, a group of guys that say we're going to run this division and we're going to split the money. These 2 to 3, 4 guys, whatever it is, are going to mop the track at every show until nobody even wants to run that class. And whether I'm right or not, I think there's a lot of people that just don't want that. They'd rather go run somewhere else, whether it's because I don't want to turn my parts up or I want to go get a trophy that's easier. I can't speak for people. I don't know what people think, but I know in my experience that people do not always want to go where there's going to be three or four guys that they're going to have to deal with.
So, with that being said, though, do you think that, like, when it comes to competition amongst like Derby drivers, do you think that's increased or decreased in the recent years?
Well, I can only speak through my lens. Through my lens, it's increased. Um, Watching, and you've had a taste of it. I don't know that the hooks ever. I don't think the hooks ever set in your jaw because I think you're a hard worker, and I think if the hook was ever to set in your jaw, I think you would not stop until you did the deed. Um, but I think like the folks that I have seen, what I would call that hook set, it feels like there's nothing they wouldn't do inside that car for one more point. And I've watched people do things in cars that I don't even know that they knew were possible. They said they didn't care about the money. It was to get that other point. Or Jordan Rutherford said it's a drug. Like through my lens, competition is multiplied 10 times watching that. Now I don't watch everything in the sport, but through my lens, it is definitely increased.
So, do you think that's why do you think that's why we saw guys like Don Santel and Trevor, Don in a minivan and Trevor in a Ford Ranger? Do you think that's why that happened? The need for competition or the need for that extra point?
They did what nobody's done in 4 years, and that's draw a line in the sand that says, I'm winning and you're not. We have not had two drivers, and it's so like I could tell two sides of that story, and I'm not speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but there's been something really cool about watching point guys that maybe weren't friends before kind of stick together, like almost like they're on a team. But we never until this year watched not only a guy go right after the competition, right from the drop of the green flag, but if you asked Don Santel if he was going to run a minivan in 2020, he would have said no faster than he could. It was a confident hard no, and like he didn't win. I think he won one of them. So it's not like he was in there collecting points. He was collecting points in the cars that he likes. Now you get points for hitting the track, but I think what he was doing out there was standing up to our past two champions, Steven and JD, and they would all be able to tell the story better. But I know what I watched, and we'd never seen that before. So it was 100% to draw the line in the sand and say, you're not going to catch me.
So, did you ever think that when you started the point series, did you ever think it would get to the size that it did this past year?
No. Um, and I also, no, I'll just answer that question and say no. I didn't have a big expectation for it. Like selfishly for me, it just made my job funner. And then I didn't know that all the good things, the positive things that were going to come with it.
So, with that being said, going towards this year, well, first of all, I want to get into something. How can you explain exactly the new like setup and exactly how the new point series will work this coming year? Because I know a lot of people that like had a like kind of a hard time understanding it. Can you like go through and explain it for us, please?
Yeah, for sure. And I'll try to be quick. Um, so for our first 4 years, um, everything has funneled into one champion. So if you ran any class at any derby on our schedule and scored a top three, you got points that funneled into that one champion. Um, like I had some visions that like guys would, like for example, a guy Richie McCoon, he scored points on a mower, And then he was so excited to tell me that he ran a big car and never had. So, like in the beginning, that was my vision, was to help people grow. And what I've learned in 4 years is like people just like Derby and what they like Derby and that's okay. But it took me 4 years to figure that out. And I've also always told people that I would not ask you to do something that I wouldn't do, and I would not want to run a mini car. So like I felt like I got a little complacent. Like it was hard in the beginning, and then it started feeling like a well-oiled machine. So I wanted to shake it up to one, push myself, but to continue to push the point series forward. So in doing that, I created 6 divisions, which 2 of them already existed, just kind of behind the scenes. We already had a highest placing female, and we already had a highest placing youth. We already had a highest placing female and a highest placing youth. So those 2 divisions already existed. I just did not call them divisions. Melanie got a ring this year, and Cam got a ring. They already existed. But what change came is like I'm thinking back to when I started. It was like big car, little car, and like it feels like we just complicate the shit out of the sport with all these names of like I can't keep up. I have no idea. They all look like pro stock cars to me, and one of them, they're all named different. So like I know there's a lot of buzz about that right now, but I'm like I've got to keep this simple. So um, the best way that I could figure out, because I said like you may say national show and I may say not. Like it's our opinion of is this a big show or is it?
Yeah.
So it was like, well, it's not 100% bulletproof, but it's a solid 80% that if you're running for $5,000 somewhere, you're probably going to have some competition because there's other people that want to run for that 5,000 too. It's a lot of money. So I basically did 2 big car classes and 2 compact classes. And the only thing that separates them is um, the 2 big car and little car classes, which is the Jeffy's Fab Farm compacts and the Impact Derby products full size, are derbies that pay less than 2,500. So just as in years past, there's a standard point, a mid tier, and then there's a double pointer. So what we knew as double points before was 10,000 to win or more. Well, in the Jeffy's Fab Farm compacts now, a double point show is a $2,000 show. So if you're going to a county fair or if you're going to run the Southern Illinois Showdown and you're running a class that pays $2,000 to win, and it's a minivan class because it's compact, whether it's minivan, mini truck, mini car, throw most wanted fine art in there. It's all those classes that pay less than 2,500, and it's my belief that in the same sense that the big car, which is the Fouché Speed and Fab full size, and the gray area demo parts compacts, any class, whether it's heats and feature or one and done, that pays 2,500 or more to win, that's where you're going to see like one and dones at the Redneck Rumble or Metal Mayhem, or like you may find some county fairs that pay 2,500 or more to win, and that's fine. You can go there if that's the division that you're trying to get after. But when you go to a show and you run a class, if that class pays 3,000 to win and it's a full size class, whether it's motor swap or street stock or kicker, whatever it is, those points are going in that Fouché Speed and Fab full size division. And in the same, double points in that class is 10,000 or more, or double points in the gray area demo parts compacts is 10,000 or more. And so like now when you look at the schedule, instead of just looking at, okay, there's these 30 shows, um, which one do I want to run at? I'm posting the show and the classes and what first place pays on that schedule. that those promoters have posted themselves, so that you can look at said derby and say, well, there's a full size class there. It pays 5,000. I'm going to run that. I'm going to run the Midwest Massacre because it's a 15-point win. And so, like the, I don't know if it's the bigger change or even as big of a change to that. So now there's these 6 divisions. I'm only going to take your highest 7 scores. You can score as many times you want until you get a royal flush, but like until you get 7 wins and they're double point wins, and like maybe you might even get extra points because this one was just a one and done, but this one you got a heat feature bonus. Like you're not going to have your highest score that, but it's also instead of a guy looking at like, man, I ain't running 30 derbies. Like take a guy like Bob Whitaker. If this was the structure that I had last year, Bob Whitaker's top 5 because we crossed paths that much. We probably crossed paths 5 times, and he was in the top 3 every time, and they were big money scores. So he gonna get more points for those. Hell, he may have been in the top 3 just for running 5 or 6 derbies, but he got second at Meadow Mayhem. He won Midwest Massacre. He won River City Rampage. Like he really laid down some carpet.
So instead of having to like do what Don Santel did this past year and run everything from full size to minivans, you only have to run just like mainly whatever you want to build per se.
Yep.
So the only thing that I kind of don't disagree with is for the gosh darn. So if you I have this pulled up here. So if it's for 2,500 or up, that's the same amount of points than if it's 2,500 or $10,000, correct? Or am I missing something?
No, so I'm sorry. I know I said a lot in there. So for example, for the Fouché Speed and Fab, the full size big car class 2,500 and up, from 2,500 to 49.99 is 10-point win. From 5,000 to 10,000 is 15-point win. From 10,000 up, so it's still structured as it was in the past with different point tiers. So that's where it's gonna get like. That's why I said you may have 7 wins, but you may not have the possibly have yet.
So why did you cap it off at 7 wins?
That's the number that. So, like dirt track guys, they limit how many times they can score. And a good friend shared that with me. And like the quick number in my mind was like 10 or 12. But then I started looking at like, okay, our champion this year, at that time he'd only ran like 15 derbies. So like, am I really taking a lot of pressure off of him if I'm saying now I'm going to take your highest 12 scores? The guy's still going to run 30 derbies, so or whatever it takes to get 12. You know as well as I do, you may not place top 3 in all 12 of those. So, like, I tried to go with a low enough number that was attractive for Adam Fouché or a guy that just doesn't run all year long because they're busy and other stuff. But if they got a little wind in their sail, they may run 5 or 6 of them, but also high enough that all of a sudden we don't have a 10-way tie. And I have tiebreakers, but like it's my belief that if we get 2 guys that win 7 times and there's 7 double pointers and there's 7 heat features, they're a royal flush. It's as high as you can score. That's gonna be monumental. Like we'll cross that, but that's gonna be a lot of good driving, good winning, and that's what I'm after: driving people to try to do awesome stuff.
So what made you decide to change everything from the past year just so you can get more drivers and like broaden everything up in a way?
I felt like I was holding it back. Um, I think I already said once, so not to repeat myself, but if I didn't say it, it started to feel like a well-oiled machine. So it's time to get uncomfortable. It's going to be a lot more work for me, and I also like taking away the stipulation that I have to be the announcer there. I used to think, and I could have been right, and I'll find out. But I used to think that I needed to be there, like almost as a supervision. But what I've learned in 4 years is if I did not trust people, I would not work with them. And so I'm not just going to let somebody in there that I don't trust. And if there's issues, we'll address them when they come. But if there's dumb crap that's going to happen at a derby, it's going to happen whether I'm there or not. So I'm going to try to get to the ones that I can, but it's definitely gonna stretch my comfort zone to let go of the vine a little bit and put some trust in the people that help me do it, the promoters. It's also going to give the drivers more opportunities to score because I'm only one person and I just can't be everywhere.
So how many shows are there coming up for this next season?
Well, the schedule's not final, but since registration's open now, I did post what schedule I had so far. Um, and it's probably, it might be 70 or 80%. I don't know, but there's still people I know are going to be in it that aren't in there yet because they just don't have their stuff done yet. Everybody's still working on 2023. I think I counted like 33 or 34 shows, whereas last year I backed it all the way down to like 24 shows because I was still thinking like I need to be there, I need to be there, and I not only do I not want to work every weekend, but people cannot build that many cars. Like the drivers just couldn't keep up. But now that they only have to have 7 good scores, it's almost like playing poker. And I never really looked at it like that until talking to you. Like you're just trying to build a good hand, and you may be the leader with 5 good scores, and you may be able to go run some derbies that you want to go run or whatever till somebody starts getting on your tail. And then, I'm not planting seeds. I don't know what strategies people have, but if, like I said, if a guy like Bob or somebody that wouldn't normally be a part of it was like, you know what, Braden Heap, Braden Heap, I told him, I think he got 8th place this year. I said, Braden, we cross paths 4 or 5 times a year. Every time you're at the bottom, you are a solid driver. If you just sign up, I promise you, you'll be in the top 10. And that's what we crossed paths about 4 or 5 times, maybe 6. And there he was. Got a spring explosion win. And he's a guy that's always there at the bottom. And there's people like that, unless that luck, gets in their way, they're going to be at the bottom.
So with going forward to next year, what do you think you might have to change for next year, or if anything?
After like 26 or 25.
Yes, sir.
So I like to say marginal gains because it's my belief that if you change too much when things are going well, you could go in the wrong direction. So I would forecast not changing a whole lot because it's going to take this whole year to get used to this new structure. Um, and then after that, uh, kind of look and see what this is certainly the segue if we were ever going to do a class or any kind of a like common rule, like this is a stepping stone towards it because now it's broken into 6 divisions, and so like you really could do something like that. That's not that's not the plan, but it could be. I would just forecast like looking at, okay, what oversight did we have this year? What balls did we drop? And let's pick them up, let's fix them, and just make those small tweaks for some marginal gains for 2025.
So how how much more how many more drivers do you think this will attract compared to last year?
Um, I'd like to see a 25% increase. So last year we had 52. I think it'd be awesome if we had 75, but I mean, time will tell. We had 52 last year, and I said I'd be, there's that head trash of I'm going to make this move and actually make people register now, and everybody's going to fold and leave, and nobody's going to want to be a part of it. And that's all bullcrap head trash. I was going to be happy if we had 20 people in it. So when there was 52, that was pretty cool. So if we could just continue the trajectory and have about a 25% increase, I think that'd be awesome.
So one of the things that I was kind of thinking about is, do you think that since how you changed it to this like new new way of basically you changed the format of it, do you think that's going to discourage guys like Don Santel, who said this is it, from drawing a line in the sand and doing whatever it'll take? Do you think it'll discourage that or encourage that like type of mentality?
I don't think that goes away. I think if anything, it's so I think the opportunity is there to amplify it because how confident do you think he was in that minivan sticking his chest out? Now, how confident do you think he'd be sticking his chest out in a suicide Lincoln? Or like if you had to draw that line, I can't imagine what those guys went through uh running that far out of their comfort zone. uh I can't imagine what they went through mentally, but like I think that when we're in our space, when we're building the car that we want to build with our equipment that we want to run, I think that's more the reason to stick your chest out and say, uh, not tonight, MFer.
That is one that like not tonight mental like way of thinking is like, and I've found the most when I've ran point shows. Like when I went down, and it's every time I go down your way, down to the Preble Butler area, you're like that. All the hometown people down there, they live with that mentality. You're from out of town, not happening. You think you're gonna get points, not happening. All like some of the worst ass whoopings I've ever taken have came from down in that area when I'm trying to chase points. Which do you think that like hometown like way of thinking of it's us versus the world? Do you think that'll go away if like all those like out of towners stop heading down there for points, or do you think that'll stay?
I think that lives forever. I can't speak for every county because I personally think that my county had that the worst, the bad, like that mentality. And if you asked somebody from Butler County, they had it. And if you ask somebody from like, I think everybody has that county pride, and I just think there's certain counties that's probably got more balls than others to actually pull the trigger on it. And like that creates some waves because there's that head trash again. There's this points guy that now he's got this storm of people, and probably feeling singled out, and it could really be as simple as like you can score anywhere on that schedule but here. And it means like Frankie one time told me that a guy told him one time, like, never mess with a man that has a purpose. And whether it's that points guy with the purpose that he's willing to die in that car to get those points that night, and that's why we see a guy like Terry Abadi come and win Preble County 3 times or twice or whatever it was, or it's the opposite, that it's those 10 guys back in the pits that's been sitting back there. And truth be told, they're probably not sitting back there like, yeah, we're going to tear him a new butt. We're going to do this. They're probably sitting back there concerned about like, are we going to be able to stop this character? And so like when they go out there, I think they go out there like a loaded gun, and they're ready to die on that hill before that person scores points in their town. And I think that's pretty cool. And then at the same time, it's hard to watch when it's a guy I know that drove 8 hours or something like that.
This brings up one of the things I want to talk to you about. So one of the things, like we just mentioned this and talked about this, that whole it's either you get out of here basically way of thinking that that has like we've traveled around a bunch for Derby throughout the past few years, and one thing I've noticed is that when it comes to certain county fairs, like the people, they're like, when it comes to the hometown boys, it's like a celebrity shows up. It's insanity. Like when I went to Jay County this year, the hometown crowd loves the hometown boys. When you go down to Butler, Preble, they love the hometown boys. Which it's really weird because when I go to my hometown, they hate me. It's really weird. It's really weird because I think about it and I was like, what am I doing wrong? What am I looking at it? You know, you go down here, they love everybody. The hometown guys, they get treated like royalty. What did I do wrong? That's, I guess, what I'm thinking about it,
Well, I heard you say that on another podcast, and I kind of reflected on that a little bit. And it could be something as simple as that it's really 100 people, but you hear 1,000 people. And of those 100 people, there's only 2 that even actually know you. But they don't know you. They know what they see or what they think they see. And when those 2 people start booing in a crowd, whether it's 2 or 200, it's like dominoes falling because there's 198 other sheep sitting there ready to walk off the cliff to slaughter that are like, they're booing, we're booing. And now those 100 people are booing, which sounds like 1,000 to you. And it really could be that simple, that it's not like, man, this whole crowd hates me.
Which so over the years, do you think like winning a typical county fair, do you think the status of that has went down dramatically since all these big shows have came along?
Yeah. I Well, I don't know because I'm not winning county fairs, but what I as a Derby fan and as somebody who's been there, again, like, not to be that old guy back in my day, um, but winning a county fair that nobody's ever heard of and running that heat and that feature against, the story might be 100 wagons, but it was really 20, but like it really was like you did something. And today, that I think that same thing transfers over to, if you win what's perceived as a national show, now you've done something. It means, like, if Scotty's standing there with his Montgomery County feature trophy and I'm standing there with my Metal Mayhem trophy, I get 100 likes and you get 10. And you may have worked way harder and derbied way harder.
Which why do you think it's the payout that changed that? What do you think changed it to that?
That's a good question. I mean, I've never really thought about that. I've thought about that, like, winning a fair seemed harder then than it does today. But, like, again, who knows how hard it is really if I'm not out there doing it. I'd only know what I watch. But as far as, like, what changed that, I mean, I just think that what I call a standalone show, when the Metal Mayhems and the Dents and the like, whatever those shows were that built that stage for now what we call national shows, now it feels like if you create a Facebook page, buy a tent, create a banner, name a show some corny name. I shouldn't say corny because we're all doing our best. So, like, I take that back. You name it some creative name, whatever you came up with.
Like Dead Man Derby, No Mercy.
Okay, now we're corny. He's gonna love that, by the way. He needs a little attention sometimes.
He's
But
probably sitting there groping a snake, just watching TV, watching us on the big screen.
oh no, he's playing with his Hot Wheels. But I just feel like there's almost like this recipe to have a national show now, and I don't know what determines it. If it feels like if it's going to be national, it had better guarantee good money, like because that's where you're going to get drivers because they and I don't like to say that drivers chase money. Um, that's the 100% calls. There's drivers that do want to run where the meat and potatoes is at because if I win, I want to say that I beat these people. Like I want to run where the people's going to be that either are something or they think they're something. And when they think they're something and I don't think they are, that's almost even more of a charge to go there. And as Don would say, bully the bullies.
Which one since traveling around the country a little bit, Derby, and one thing I've noticed is that everybody talks to the national events. In my eyes, the only real national events would be shows that bring in drivers nationally. Shows like the Bash, Blizzard Bash, Gold Rush. Those technically, in the way I see it, are some of the only real national events because they bring in people from all over the country. Do you agree with that, or do you?
Well, I mean, so I think that's one way you could look at it. But then it's like if because of a point, a guy like Santel drives 12 hours and runs a county fair, and then another guy from another state and another guy from another state and a girl from another state, like, is that, if that were completely the case, then now there would be a national show in BFPA.
Hmm. I think when you go into the naming shows part, I think you go into the same thing about naming compacts. You got stock compacts, pro stock compacts, eco stock compacts, bumper swap compacts. I think you can all name the same thing 100 different names. You know what I mean? I think big shows are shows that are big on one side of the country. Do you think shows like Dead Man and Palmetto Destruction, do you think those are national events or just regular big shows, big in the area?
I mean, that's another good question, and I don't know that I have the answer for it, but there's also something probably to be said about the sacrifice that they're making. So, let's take you mentioned Palmetto. I've never been there. They're going to be part of the point series this year. I've worked with those guys. We're good friends. But they've made some kind of a pretty big sacrifice to have an event center like that. And you talk to Tim Clark, somebody that puts on monstrosity shows, or Sam Williams, the amount of boxes that have to be checked, the bigger investment you make, the bigger venue, the more drivers, the more classes, the amount of boxes that those guys got to check. Just, it doesn't matter if they check every one of them twice, they're getting roasted about something. So I'm not trying to jump down that rabbit hole, but there's probably something to be said about that. The amount of investment and resources that it takes to put on a show could help define, is it really a national level? What kind of red carpet are they laying out?
So, how do you think, going into the national show topic, how do you think, big shows like Blizzard Bash and the Bash and not Capital City Carnage, Gold Rush, how do you think that, those insanely big shows, how do you think that has affected the rest of the sport?
Oh, I think in a positive way, because I think there's still that thing for a guy like you to chase and want to be a part of. I want to be on this stage, or I want to drive through this tunnel. a show like that, people get excited just to even get to say they're there watching it and post a picture that says just landed in South Dakota, or like it's like everybody who's not there is like, man, why didn't we go? We're going next year. So, like, yeah, I think that's a great thing for the sport that people have taken. Again, back to what I said, Scotty, like, there's a lot of people talking about these great and wonderful places that the sport can go. And I'm not one to say what can and can't be done, but like, I think there's some celebrating to do about where the sport's at today. It's some pretty amazing places with people making huge sacrifices financially and time wise.
So when guys go out there to run the Blizzard Bashes and the Gold Rushes and those insane shows, do you think they're ego driven or passion driven?
Both. Both. Um, I've heard you say, there's some health and some ego. I think there's health in anything when it serves you well and when it doesn't. So, like, I think the health and the ego is saying that I'm good enough to go to this show. And I would find it real hard to believe that anybody would make that kind of investment if they didn't think that they were going to go there and win. So, like, that's when you really get the card players at the table to make a 30-hour drive or a 20-hour drive, and like the rooms, it adds up. Everything adds up, all the way to the $2,000 you spent at Napa that you didn't think about the week of the Derby.
I think the best quote to summarize that would be Don Santel when when I had him on, and he was talking about winning. You can't win them all is the dumbest thing you can ever say. You get when you're going to when you're going to any show, or you're in the truck, like, we're just gonna go there, we're gonna lose, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna try our best. No, you're going to win. You're going to win. And I think that's a huge mentality for which did you have that mentality back when you were Derby and Hot and Heavy and all the big shows or national shows or whatever they're called?
Oh yeah, yeah. Which is why earlier I said I lost sight of how to lose. And so, like, then to connect that to what you're saying now, or what I said about how is your ego serving you? Is it good or is it bad? My ego was not serving me well, because I was losing sleep over trying to figure out how that ding dong beat me, or, like, losing reality of it didn't matter what I did that night. It was his night, not mine. And I grew up saying that stuff, but I lost sight of it. So, like, that's when I say when an ego starts to not serve you so well. That's when it started not serving me well.
I know the exact feeling. Like this, I said it. I forget when I said this, but I said when I won the bash, I feel like that was one of the worst mentally things that could have happened to me because it gave winning that show gave me this like or this mental state that like this is it. I guess it felt like it took all the hunger away from like hunger and drive away from the journey, and I slacked off basically the rest of the year. Like I was still working hard and trying, but like I just I wasn't as hungry. I could notice I wasn't as hungry as I should have been, and I usually was in years prior. Does that make sense?
It does, and like you've mentioned Don a couple times, and like I'm a fan of watching him derby and his drive, um, and I think that's something that he does. I think that's something that he does well. That somebody could take some nuggets from is, um, and I think I said it even for myself earlier. Like, I don't give a crap if it's a $500 derby or a $500,000 derby. Plan A never changes. It's every dot you know how to dot, every I you know how to dot, every T you know how to cross. And if you go to that derby with a painted car and you didn't cross a T that you knew you probably should have crossed, that's a big shame on you if it cost you, because it doesn't always cost you, because sometimes you could paint your car 10 times and it's your night, it's your night. Well, we've talked about that, but like I do think that like that drive to that drive to show up with the same game plan every time, the same expectation, and like if I could give my old self some advice, it would be like you can't spend more time thinking about losing than you think about why you lost. And I was getting hung up on trying to figure out why the loss more than like just the brutal truth, the brutal reality of what did I not do that I could have or should have.
Like speaking of Don, like this is one thing I kind of just realized is when I had Don on, that was it felt like one of the shortest interviews I've ever done. But like the thing I've noticed, like I just caught myself now is that like almost every time I'm doing an interview or anything like that, somebody is always referencing something he said from that interview that I thought was very short and just I it was it's just weird to think about, like because Don, he's not. To be honest with you, that was the first time I ever talked to Don for more than maybe like 10 seconds. But like the guy, he's a man of very few words, but the words that he does say they're strong and impactful. So,
Well, you're always going to get the truth, whether that's what you want to hear, and that's something I've always respected and appreciated. Whether through being friends or just any conversation we've had throughout him chasing the points, he he is not afraid to give the unpopular opinion. That's for sure.
which for sure, like even when we were doing that interview, like I felt like it was going so slow, and it was a lot harder than the other ones because like everything he said, it wasn't a lot, but like it was he was saying stuff you had to think about to find the meaning. Like when I asked him like the same question that leads into a 20-minute conversation. Don, what's your favorite derby car? He gave me the answer of the next one, and I was like, huh, well
Mm.
there goes that entire talking thing. But like
Yeah.
thinking about it now, like it makes complete sense. The guy just loves to derby. He doesn't care what he's derby. Him and Trevor could go derby bicycles in the parking lot. He's just loves to derby,
when
which
when I listen to your things or anybody's things, I'm always reflecting like on myself. And when he said that, it made me think about something that I've always thought that's not that, but it's a little similar. And it's every time I build a car, it's my favorite car ever, because every time we build a car, we get that we get every time you build a car, you get better at building cars. So like every time I build a car, I always have that same feeling as my favorite car. Like it just, and if the car doesn't perform, maybe you have a different opinion afterwards. But um, uh, you really, there's really a side of that. I'm glad you said that. There's really a side of that I appreciate about Derby, and that not everybody talks about going out and running the cars and crashing them and winning or getting Mad Dog or whatever it is, but there's something special about working on your car. And when you get done at the end of the night and you take a picture of that bumper that you welded on or whatever you did, if you don't look at that picture 150 times before the next time you go back to work on your car, then me and you's different people. There's just something special about building the machine that you're going to go out there and take to war.
I know exactly. Like everybody makes fun of me because I hate running stock cars. I hate running like the cars where you don't get to put a lot of time into it. But like when I get prime example, when I got done with my bash car this past year, my team car, I was in awe that I built that. Like I couldn't believe it. Which that's why I like building those heavier and harder cars. Like if you build a stock Camry, it's like, oh yeah, cool. Now it's time to paint it. But like I sat there for an hour just like I can't believe I did this. This is insanity. Like I never thought I could do this. It's that like wow factor that just makes you love it.
Oh yeah, I mean it's your masterpiece that you built, and I'll say on whatever level from start to finish. And there's people that hate stripping the cars out, and that's something like for me from the time that first window comes out, like it's in transformation to become this machine, and it's like that's when the relationship starts, and like whether you name your cars or you call it old girl or whatever you got between that you and that car until the time you take it to its resting place, like you become one with that car every time you turn a wrench or weld a bead on it. Like it's your project, it's your masterpiece.
Like I know exactly what you're saying. Like when I built that convertible for No Mercy this past year, like I remember building that thing just because I it was a convertible. I literally had to build it from the ground up, literally. But like just as I'm going along with it, it's just like it's the wow. It's the fact that like I'm doing something that I don't think anybody's ever done, and it's just insanity. It's just the amount of like everybody makes fun of me for the amount of time and especially like because I go to welding school, and I burn more wire at home than they all do at their jobs and all that, just on derby cars, and they all make fun of me for it. But like it's the hardest part to like explain to somebody. There's like I don't like derby because I don't like all the time and stuff you put into it. But like you're not understanding why. You think like I'm not gonna lie to you, Mark. I'm sure you feel the same way. A lot of the times when you're like in the garage for 8 hours a day, when the second you get home from work to the second you go to bed, it's like it gets a little boring at times. It gets a little like, why am I doing this? But like it's that the mental thing is like you're building something amazing. That's why you're in there. That's why you're spending all your time and money. That's why you're doing it all. Do you agree with that? Or
Yeah, because it's a puzzle that you got to put every piece together to that puzzle in order for it to make a picture. And like if you skip one step, or but you said something in there. You said um, like I built this thing, and like I was so proud of it, and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I built it, and like I did this thing, and whether 10 other people have done it, you didn't know they did it. So in your mind, I did this thing that I didn't see on the internet. I did not, nobody told me, my dad didn't tell me. I came up with this idea that I'd never heard before, and this car is going to be a bad SOB. Now, let me ask you the question. Would you ever in your life get that charge if I said, Scott, these are the rules. This is what the car's got to be, top to bottom, black and white. There you go.
not at all. It's which I that you make a very good point when it comes back to the unified rule set. Like we all want to be able to run the cars we built anywhere we want, but like let's be honest though, that's just it's not gonna happen. Because like prime example, I built the convertible this past summer. No, all the rules say no convertibles. It's I'm not complaining. It is what it is, but like it's just that the how do I explain this the best? It's that sense of like ingenuity and that sense of like I can't believe I just did this. That's gonna go away with it, and I think that's gonna hurt the whole thing for the unified rule set. And nobody's gonna be like, well, I don't because like prime like it won't happen right away because right away the honeymoon effect's gonna be like this is amazing. I can't believe we're doing this. This is awesome. But then like when you're actually doing it for like more than 1 year, you're gonna be like, oh, sweet, Black Crown Vics, yay. Oh, sweet, that's awesome. It's gonna get rid of that factor of demolition derby, like the factor, like when you go out there to Utah, how every car's painted in some random crazy color. That's that wow factor. It's gonna get rid of that.
And I don't want to paint the picture like that I'm this brick wall. I'm just painting what I see as the truth and reality that like if somebody's not thinking of it, that's what I'm thinking of. And so yeah, you could make changes from year to year that keeps the drivers interested, and then it's kind of like, oh, what's going to be the change this year? And then now you're to the drawing board trying to beat that rule. Like there's ways around it not being a solid black and a solid white. But I also think there's something just special about demolition derby and everything we've talked about that gives you that fix and that excitement and that feeling of that you can't get anywhere else. I don't think you can get it anywhere else. I don't think you can smoke it, drink it, snort it, and I don't think any other sport has it. Other sports are special in their own way. Our sport's special in the way that keeps nut jobs like me and you interested.
Oh, 100%. A question Chris Versker just asked is who has helped make both of us become a builder, and who have we helped become builders along the way?
Uh, for me, when I met Toby, like he definitely, I had no idea people were running parts that they were running. Like I was winning derbies before I met Toby, so like I had a chip on my shoulder when we first started hanging out. Like, look, man, I already got the recipe. I don't need your recipe. But like when I really found out like the things that he did that were just different ways of seeing and doing things, different perspectives and like different parts. I had no idea people were running some of the parts that they were running when I went to Metal Man for the first time. So if I had to say like who's somebody that really opened my eyes up to a whole nother level of building is 100% him. And if I had to say who have I helped pass that along to, I'd say probably definitely Justin Buchanan. Um, Justin's worked with me on and off for many years and does now. And I can remember him when I was making my first slider drive shaft. I threatened to beat his ass if he came over by the lathe because I didn't want him to see what I was doing because I thought he had a big mouth and I didn't want him to tell people. But through years past and him maturing a little bit and um, sharing everything that I knew with him, and then him taking it to a whole nother level of like car building, definitely really appreciate both those people and thinking about building cars.
So that brought up a topic that I wanted to get into real quick. How did you meet Toby? Is there like a crazy story, or like how did you guys meet?
The first time, well, we had met. Like I got Dave Gard kicked me out of Mayhem one year out of the heat, and I remember he just said you got screwed or something going off the track, and I didn't know him, but I knew him of who he was. So like that's probably the first time we ever spoke words. But he, we had talked somehow, probably on We Crash or something, and he'd asked me to go run a derby with him, and I thought he was nuts. I showed up. I'll At that time I had my crap done. Like we're going to get to the derby on time. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. Everything's going to be done. And when I showed up to meet him, uh, somewhere, where was we at? In like close to Cincinnati, and we were going to Kentucky at Brad Taylor's shop, I think. He freaking still doing tires. Uh, I mean, it's time to go. And he never bothered him a bit. Like it was like, oh, we'll be all right. And we got to that derby. Yeah, I was so stressed out. I thought for sure they was not going to let me run. We got to that derby at like 6:59. It started at 7 o'clock, and we went there and ran. And like at that time, there was not a lot of people like splitting. And at that time, splitting didn't mean hey, let's all just like shut off. We would still derby, but like I think when it first started, like whoever won would take half the money and then the other half would go into the pot and split with everybody else. So like splitting has just got way out of hand. But at that time that's what was going on, and I didn't know no better, and I knew him and Brad was running together, and I asked him to if they wanted to split, and I think if he tells the story, Brad said no. Brad probably told the story. Toby said no, but they told me no, and then we went out there, and Toby had something bad happen to him, and something bad happened to Brad, and Trey was out there, and I won the Derby. But like from that day forward, like we got a kick out of that, and we just became friends after that, and just started just started running derbies and hanging out. And I don't have to tell you or Chris one, like he sucks you in to that funnel. And like next thing you know, it's 6 o'clock in the morning. You're like, dude, I just want to go to bed.
So, how many other great people have you met through derbying?
I don't, Scotty, there's a bunch, man, starting with you. Like I'll never forget the night that it was in Dunbar. Like I said, they blend together for me, but everybody was allowed to work on their cars, and there was there was only like one person working on their car that night, and it was raining, and you was out there just getting after it. And I was like, man, like I always knew you were a hard worker just by stories or things that I'd seen, but like that night, like I just knew that we may not be cut from the same cloth, but we're cut from the same cloth in a sense that you didn't plan on them getting outworked. You might not win, but nobody there was going to outwork you. So like to say like how many great people, I mean, I can never do justice to the great people of what they've done for me. I can never do for the people in this sport what people have done for me.
Oh, I completely agree. So, going forward to next year, what are the big plans you're looking forward other than the point series? Is there anything else going on?
Derby wise,
Yeah.
um, no, I'm laser focused on that. Like I said, I think we've about got the magazine done with Lexi for this year for all the spotlights for the winners, and all the money's paid out, and not all the trophies are sent out yet. I still got first through third. I got to mail, and Jeffy's still mailing some trophies, um, thank you cards. I still got quite a bit of work to get done for this year, but like you asked, so you've seen I've already put stuff out for next year. So really, it's like this. It's about like building a car. It's this chase of what all can I get done before January 27th when Sturgis starts, and at that time it's just rolling. Like you're running the car. That's the car you're running. So once the schedule starts, like there's not a whole lot of getting things done at that point. It's just managing what you've started.
So, real quick, one of the things I wrote down, but I forgot until now. Where did the rings come from? Where did the instead of having trophies, where did the like rings come? The points rings come from?
There was no golden idea. I thought it was cool that Dent used to give rings, and that's something Toby was proud of whenever we first started. I remember the first time I went to his house, he took me to the mantle and showed me his ring, and like I know we horse around, and I know like people give Fatty a hard time, but like I do not personally have one, so I can't say I like, but I can tell you that I know what it's like to hand somebody one. You have one. It there's something about it that you can't put a dollar value on, and you could probably answer the question better than me. But um, I really just wanted to keep something going that I thought was pretty cool then, and that be a way of showing drivers appreciation for how hard they worked.
That's one thing I never understood. Like, so when I got my ring, I worked for a week. I'm not gonna lie to you. I worked at school. I worked at the grocery store. I wore it everywhere. Okay, like I would not take it off. Now, the one thing that either I'm crazy, which is it's very possible. Okay, but it's weird how nobody else does that. Or am I weird for? Am I the weird one that's like, hey, what's up, everybody? What's up, English teacher? You see my real ring? Yeah, that's what I thought. Is it like, why do you think nobody goes around showing off their ring?
I just think it's different generations. Like I think it's awesome that you did that, and it made me feel like you were proud of it. So like I loved watching that you did that. It made me nervous. I didn't want you to tear it up or lose it, but at the same time, like if that's a lesson life was going to teach you, then that's on you, not me. But like I just think I think it's generation, no different than like things that were beat in our head, like don't tell people what you make an hour at work, but then another generation 20 years later is like, why wouldn't you? That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. So like, I think you doing that, like I Cam threw it on his hand right off the rip, like he was pretty proud of it too. So I honestly enjoyed that you were flaunting it like that because, some people there there's some that takes some balls to even be man enough to even show people like and not be embarrassed about your accomplishment because you don't want people to think you're something or not. Well, hell yeah, you're something because you won that ring.
Which I'll probably get in trouble for this, but like the way I'm perceived by most people is people either love me, they think I got all this heart, or they think I'm some cocky little kid. There's not really an in between. That's just the two of them. But like going back to the ring thing, like when I was wearing that, like I remember being in school and like some of my friends were like making fun of me, like because they don't understand. And I'm like, listen, you don't understand what it took to get this thing. You don't understand the amount of hours we had to drive to places that I didn't even want to go to. It's getting one of those rings. It's like, it's truly a testament to see how much you want it. Cause like about halfway when it's the honeymoon effect. When you first start, you're like, dude, we could do this. It's not that much. And then it's like towards the end of it, and you're like, this is the dumbest thing I could have possibly done with my summer. I'm not having fun. I'm running classes I don't want to run. I'm running cars I don't want to run. It's cold. It's just not a good experience. But finally, when you get done with it and you get that ring, you're like, I am the man. I am that guy. It's just another way of thinking about it, And I think, I don't know, either I'm crazy or I got heart. I don't know which one. Depends on who you ask.
No, I think both. I think you got to be a certain level of crazy um, to even have the drive and the determination to accomplish something like that. But you also got to have that heart. And like I'm glad you put it like that because like you couldn't engrave the amount of stories that were inside that ring, but like it packs so many of those nights, those peaks and valleys. I don't even want to be here. This is stupid. Why am I even running? I'm gonna get junked. Blah 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 blah. Head trash for miles, and we do all that just for that time when it comes down to you and five Jaegers, and I'm scared for you. Uh, honestly, genuinely, I'm scared for you because um, the odds are you're not just getting ready to get junked. You might get knocked unconscious. And watching, I said earlier, when I get to watch people do something in a car that even they might not have thought was possible, all for that next point or that ring. Watching what you did when you outlasted and then beat the Jaegers that night, like it was. If you said what's some of the most amazing things you've ever seen, and I could remember it, it would be one of the most amazing things ever seen. Because as a fan, as an announcer, like that's not what I'm betting on. It's nothing against you or your capabilities. I'm betting on you dying, and you didn't, and you won. And like I believe it's because you had that hunger, that survival of the fittest, that if I don't make it through this next guy, then I'm not going to get to this next place and get this next point. And then the next thing you know, it's one on one, and you did something that 100 other people uh, don't do all the time, and that's put the rock in the hole. Like you could have got that far and got second and just got junked, but no, man, that was pretty awesome to be a part of.
Which, speaking of that night, that night down there in Dunbar, that night is when I think of the Unified Point Series. That is exactly that weekend for me sums the entire thing up. Because we talked about you make some of the best friends you'll ever have when you're chasing points. That night, the car I ran when I beat Jaegers and all them guys, it was Cam Penwell's youth car. Now, earlier in the year, me and Penwell's hated each other. Like we hated each other from the King, from the back. Like just not good terms, to say the least. And then that night sparked literally. Tony Penwell is one of my best friends. I talk to him at least 2-3 times a day. Billy, all them guys, some of my best friends. Speaking of this, like the I don't want to be here. You're down there. It's freezing cold. It's raining all day long. The show's till 3 a.m. I ran 2 cars. Oh no, yeah, I brought 2 cars that night. The first, I ran the youth full size there with my championship car. Just terrible luck. And then I couldn't get it put back together for the stock class. Terrible luck. And then just for Penwells to come up to me and say, like, listen, we're not going to run this car. We're going to go home, cut it up. We don't need it anymore. Do you want to take it out there so your dad can run with you, so you help you get some points? That started that friendship is something that I can't repay you enough for us even being there to begin with. And like that, even going out on that track with all the Jaegers and with all those guys, that's one of those things that, like, I forget where I was. It was when I was at Jay County this past year, and it was one of them nights. You've been there. You're getting there. It's like, wow, this is going to be a rough one. Nobody likes me here, and I'm just like, well, if I could take on like 4 or 5 of the hardest hitting compact drivers in the entire country at once, all by myself, we can get this done. So it's the amount of like experiences, the amount of like help and progress that night gave me is, I can't thank you enough for
it. That's awesome, man. And the story just goes on, right? Because I think that may have been the first time Cam had ever ran a mini car, and he won with the same car, right? And then like, I remember that plain as day. Like, I thought you were going to fold up and go home because, like, you about got the car ready, and then the heat started without you, and it was a nightmare. And then you go out there and have maybe the best win you'll ever have. Like, and it's not like, that's why I say we got to see the reality. It's not like you lined all 4 up and blew their heads off. Like, things just happened. You dodged, weave, the right cards fell, the right dominoes fell, and when the Thanksgiving dinner was on the table, you ate it, and that's what it takes.
Which the best part about that entire story and about that car is that, so it was the year before when I was traveling around with Stacy's. We went down there to Courthouse's cleanup show for a points show. And it was Cam's first youth show, because I think he ran a wagon or something at their hometown fair that year, something along them lines, but that was his first youth compacts. So I don't remember what happened. It was Penwell's. Everybody's telling me like Penwell's, this kid's the greatest. They're telling me all this stuff. So I was like, okay. So I go out there and like I go after Cam. Nothing against Cam, but I ended up breaking Cam's finger, thumb, finger, something like that night, and then that led to the bash. And then that is the first ever time that I met or even knew who the Penwells were. Obviously who they were, the guys with the roundbacks at the bash. But that was the first time I ever had any interactions with them. And then to be able to go and run that car that I hit him in that night, to go down there to Dunbar with, is just, it's crazy to think about. It really is.
It is, man. And that's what I live for. So, like, to answer a lot of questions you've asked, like, that's what makes me tick. Like, being lucky enough and fortunate enough to get to share stories like that with people like you is like, I mean, Gage was just on there, and like, I'm coming off of a hot story with him, like one for the books for me and him, and nobody else ever even has to know about him unless like you tell them. But it's just like, it's these moments that you just can't put a price tag on, that like you can't even make it up.
What was the story between you and Gage?
He mentioned it in South Dakota.
Oh, yeah.
Me and Michelle, we had plans to go see the Crazy Horse and do some things that day, and it was just driving me crazy, those tents being out there, right out from the hotels, the tents for the national teams. And Ryan's one of our great sponsors, and I've been great friends with Ryan and Megan for a long time. Dave Meyer was out there. I knew Gage was out there. We've been great friends for a long time. So like, while I was waiting for her to get ready, I just couldn't take it. Like I had to get out there. So I went out there as I was already ready to go. And, and he was, in his words, he was just in a bad place. You know, name one of us that wants to win and when things don't go our way is in a good mood. So like I call it, it's not my thing, but it's level one energy. It's my talk from the expo last year. It's not, it doesn't always have to be the victim, like woe is me, but it's like, man, this is bullshit, that this happened and that happened and it didn't go my way, and I don't even know why I came here, or this or that. And like we just talked for like 10 minutes, and like I knew the whole time he was talking that I was getting ready to break my plans. I just didn't know how. And I went back and talked to Michelle, like, we can't go there. Like, Gage needs me. And like, when you can have an experience like that with a friend like that, where number one, I like working on derby cars. So the fact that she was okay with it and was cool with it, and I didn't have to feel like I let her down, but then to get to go out there and help somebody rise up from what felt like the ashes for him, because he was in such a bad place. He was ready to pack up and leave, and just bust your ass all day long. Like you, those experiences are like a good drunk or something with somebody. Like you just never forget it. Like it's an experience you guys have forever. And then for them to go out there and for him to have the run that he did, like just went out there and junked everything in his path. It, it it's things like that. That's one in a million stories that I hope I always remember them, or other people do, and they remind me of them, because that's what I live for, is to get to share experiences like that with people.
That's awesome, Mark. Well, on that, I think we're at a great place to leave this off. Do you got before we get off here? Do you got anything else you want to say? Anything to promote the point series or anything like that?
No, not so much about me. I just want to encourage you, Scott, to just to keep doing what you're doing, and um, try to find what's not working and make those small tweaks, because I think I just ended I was just with Chris Marquardt and Brian for their last podcast, and that meant a lot to me to get to share that with them. And what I told them was, like, every week they showed up, and you know out of those 450, maybe they had some weeks off, but not many. Even when weeks they might have had 5 viewers, they showed up. They just kept showing up. And like, I think whether it's your thing that you're doing, or anything anybody starts, like, you're going to have to keep showing up during the peaks and valleys. And like, I think you're doing something that I haven't seen anybody do as well as you're doing. If that doesn't, so the what I see you doing, that I encourage you to keep doing, is you just keep asking questions. I don't know where in the hell you're getting the questions, if you're feeding off the conversation, or if you've got them prepared, or it's all the above. Um, the idea of a podcast and to have somebody on is to get that person talking. Look what you said about Don. You know, there's so many people that got to see a side of him. Now, if you talk the whole podcast, if you talk 70% of the time and he talked 30, then you would not have got to see all that. And like, I think having Tim on, like, him telling some like hard truth, like, you keep getting people on there and just keep them talking about things that's deeper than, like, what's your favorite color of derby car. Those things are cool to know, because it kind of humanizes people. But like, really digging into what makes them tick, what drives them to do the great things that they do. And people like me is going to be taking nuggets from that every time we listen to it.
That's great. I want to touch on one thing that you mentioned there is like when I first started this, I was like, I got to be all prepared. I got to have all these questions. But then, like, it was up until Don's interview, I ran out of questions halfway through at like the 20-minute mark. And I was like, huh, well, time to start winging it. But then, like, it was through that I found like that's when you find like the raw like the stuff that people want to watch, because if I have what I found was if I have 30 questions here and I ask you like in that exact order, all it will end up with me is saying is like, oh, I get you. Yeah. Oh, all right. Oh, yeah. All right. But if like, because I haven't been preparing at all for these, I've just been winging them basically every single one of them, because that's how I find that the conversation, it's more like, it becomes more lively and more like relatable in a way. Is that, which I could be right, I could be wrong, I don't know.
No, you're right. You're 100% right. And like, whether that's my lens, I can only speak for myself, but that's what makes somebody like me tune into it, is because, like, think about the great conversations you've had with John Rutherford on the phone. And imagine if you could have taped that. And if other people, like, you go to these deep places and you talk about these breakthroughs and these aha moments, like, that's the kind of stuff that people want to hear, even more so than where they're from and things like that.
Like my favorite interviews to do are the ones with people that I've never talked to before. Like the one I did last week with Gage, that was one of my favorite ones, because and with Don too. Like I've never talked to these people before. Like it's just it's amazing to just get to know somebody. It just in front of a bunch of people, and you have people coming in asking questions as we're doing it. It's a really enjoying and fulfilling thing to do for a while.
Well, that's the beauty in you saying that for me, is because I've taken many courses for active listening, and like, I don't know that you have, and I've lived a whole lot more life experience than you, but for you to say that, like, there's a difference in listening to understand and listening to respond. And when you start listening to understand and you just stay curious wherever that conversation goes, you're going to untap some great things out of people.
I completely agree. Well, there, Mark, thank you for coming on. You want to say anything real quick before we get off here?
And thank you, Scotty, and keep it up.
Awesome. Thank you, Mark. The Crashing for Kids Cancer PayPal is in the description of this. I completely forgot about it. All the money goes towards, I forget who it goes towards to be this right now. It might just go into the pot saving for the next person. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see. We have Jason Bradinsky this Thursday. Should be a good one. I got Songaluski and Gage Sumner sending me some questions, so this should be interesting at least.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for tuning in. We shall see you on Thursday. Bye, Mark.
See you, Scott.
Yep.